Welcome back to Global Fintech Fest, organized by Fintech Convergence Council of IAMAI and National Payments Corporation of India, presented by Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance and Reserve Bank of India, powered by Amazon Pay, and brought to you by WhatsApp and Google Pay. Ladies and gentlemen, we now move to the next panel discussion on creating a conducive ecosystem for the fintech sector to thrive. I would like to introduce you to the moderator, Ms. Suniti Nanda, Fintech Officer, Government of Maharashtra, and our esteemed panelists, Ms. Gela Boshkovich, Head of Europe, Financial Data and Technology Association, Dr. Christopher Sear, UK Treasury, Fintech Envoy and Chairman, Fintech North, Ms. Denise G., Managing Director, Findexible, and Ms. Teresa Matthew, Director, Umidyar Network India. Welcome, everyone. I would request Ms. Suniti Nanda to take over.
Thank you. Thank you, GFF, for the great session and welcome to GFF, the second day. So I have a very interesting panel today. Eating their brains and to just set the context, very interesting topic. Since last 2 days in GFF, you have heard so much about what's happening all around in the fintech sector. The last decade, especially last 5 years, fintech sector actually has seen a real upward movement. You actually, I mean, as of today, if I have to refer to some reports, it's around 67 unicorns that are out there in the market with trillions of dollars of transaction potential that is out there. Of course, VC money is flowing into it like anything. All this is just a testament of how the ecosystem is thriving at this moment, all thanks to the good regulators, the governments, that the real base work that has been done, some enablers who are actually working in this ecosystem to panel actually enablers, and I look have an perspective and way really define it is working, what not working, is something that we learn from each other. So with any further time, what I'll do is ecosystem all about what all these panelists are actually doing differently in their areas, and then with some time understanding with and beyond COVID what all things has to be done by this ecosystem to so let's start with Dr. Krish. Being a professor, you are wearing many hats, but I'll probably try to understand you more from the fintech envoy. You have done so much. You have why don't you take some time and let us know how do you see this? What does this ecosystem, thriving ecosystem, means to you?
Well, okay, thank you, and very nice to meet you all. And although I can't see you, I'm familiar with the panel process, and I'm very glad to be talking here. So I've got sort of three hats I wear, maybe four. One of which is this rather peculiar title, which is Her Majesty's Treasury's Fintech Envoy. Another is an academic, so I do work with a number of universities in the UK. And the final thing is I actually have my own fintech, and what happens is you tend to, when you've been in this space for long enough, get bitten by the entrepreneurial bug and you find the problem that you want to solve. And so I do have my own company. The good news is that at least half of it is based in India. So I have a dev team based, a wholly owned dev team that's based in Bangalore, and the business development team based in the UK, but we are a global company. So I have all kinds of perspectives here, but the one I'll focus on is this FinTech Envoy one for the moment. Because it's moot, it's relevant, because the issue we've always had in the UK is that fintech has focused in and around London, and there's been a lot of reasons for that. Predominantly, it's been because that's where the money is, that's where people have seen the problems are, that's where your big clients are. But actually, what happens when you're moving into a consumer space is that consumers are all over the UK, and in fact, all over the world. And when you dig into the UK economy and the UK capability, what you realize is there's lots of capability around the UK that doesn't exist in London. And actually, when one looks around the UK, what you see is that there are parts of the UK that London goes to get its capability. So if you want weather modelling and weather data, you go to Bristol and Exeter, which is a place out in the west of the United Kingdom. And what we've had to do is we've had to create an infrastructure and a framework to knit this national capability together. And I think there's a lot of things that you can learn and we can learn together with a similar system in India, because you have Mumbai, but you have other places in India that have different capabilities. And the trick is to promote those, but not cannibalize them, and to work collectively. And that's what the FinTech Envoy role does in the UK. It's there to knit that national capability together, to present it as a coherent outward bound message, and to act as an inward bound conduit for organizations that want to come to the UK. So I'll leave it there, and we'll save the comments for COVID to those direct questions. But I'll hand back to you, Suniti, so you can ask other people as well within the panel.
Thank you, Dr. Chris. So with that thought, for sure, like Gela, you are also working in the policy space. I would just, as a continuation, I think it will be good to hear from your side. What does this ecosystem, conducive ecosystem actually means to you?
Thank you, Suniti. It's interesting because I come from a policy and regulatory economic background, and having come into the fintech space about 10, 15 years ago, looking at different hubs and having global roles in between, it really comes back to first principles. And if we're looking at what we do at the Financial Data and Technology Association, we're a trade body that is focused solely and only on the promotion of open banking with an eye to open finance. And if we start to talk about how you organize systems and the complexity of systems, it all has to start with the first principle. And that first principle for us, actually, for any successful ecosystem, is what do you build around, and what do all of the actors understand are the rules of engagement. One of those that is really critical at this point is an acknowledgement or establishment of a consumer data right. And for us in Europe, that happened under GDPR and PSD2. In Australia, that just recently happened with the CDR legislation that passed. Similar legislation is going on around the world. There are a number of jurisdictions that have formally acknowledged and enshrined a customer data right. For open banking, which is where I think most of the world is going, or we're looking at how do we actually open up the market and invite this fintech creativity, innovation, and competition with the aim to better the consumer's financial life. That outcome is maximizing the economic value of their money. It all starts with the consumer data right and the consumer's ability to direct where their data is shared and how it's used. And for those ecosystems that seem to be quite thriving, that particular right, that foundational right, exists. And everything is built around that, from bilateral to reciprocal contracts between banks and fintechs, to fintechs being licensed and being regulated and supervised in a particular manner, to open banking APIs being built to certain specifications or standards. And what's quite interesting, I think, for the UK is that particular right is clearly enshrined, and there is an organization around the infrastructure build standards. And it's now about how does the consumer actually operate within the value chain, or see that their value chain of data is actually manifesting this economic value through fintech or through bank-fintech collaboration. It's replicating itself in different jurisdictions. For India, what I find quite interesting, it's all built around a similar principle, which is this concept of digital identity. And then building on top of that with UPI and having a tech standardization that allows for that similar interoperability principle, but is still yet exploring how the consumer has the right to direct their data. And in organizing a new ecosystem, it really does matter those first principles, that one thing that you all agree upon as part of the rule engagement. And for me, that's a legal and regulatory framework. And I think that's a critical part. And as Chris mentioned, it's about managing that across the entire country, that all of the different talent pools and resource pools are still operating with that same first principle in mind.
That's a really great point, Gela, and for sure, yes, we do have a great tech in there, and the new account aggregator framework that is coming up, and with the new data privacy law that is under play, moving looking at taking some great learnings from what's happening in the UK. For sure, there is a lot that the ecosystem does, looking at a country, what all things are happening. But I strongly believe that this is about time, and we are in such a scenario where we have to look at the broader perspective, and the more we can even look out to learn, the more broader perspective we have, the better it is. So with that in mind, I'll come to Dennis. Uh, since you have co-founded Findexable, and you have a lot of data, you are looking at a holistic picture of things. How, I mean, from your lens, do let us know, how do you see like this whole thing is coming up, and how does the vantage point looks like from where you are?
Sunny, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm delighted to be here. Some of our findings. So Findexable is a data analytics company, and it is building the world's first real-time open-sourced global fintech index benchmark, and we're benchmarking 230 across 65 countries at the moment. So looking at the global picture, what we are finding in terms of what makes a successful hub, or what are the key ingredients for success in fintech hubs, really come down to talent coupled with environment, an environment of which makes it easy for fintechs to start firstly, and then incentivize them to do innovative things. So it requires, for me, a strong focus on collaboration between the fintech ecosystem itself and the national and local governments, and also, of course, the investor community. And I think Chris has mentioned the UK as a prime example of this. So if we look at a couple of other examples, and I want to mention two, Singapore City and Vilnius, which Singapore is the 4th on our ranking, and Vilnius in Lithuania is 29th. And these cities have a clear strategy on fintech. This is what they want to do. So they've created the infrastructure, they've created the support systems, and here I'm talking about accelerators, helpful associations, government incentive, regulatory environment, and then, of course, working very closely with their educational facilities, the education system. So I think those are the key elements. Looking then at a place like Tel Aviv, for example, while it is well in fintech, it doesn't mean that is their key focus. The real game for them is to develop a startup ecosystem, and it's not exactly the same as a fintech ecosystem. So, that is why they rank higher as a startup ecosystem than they do as a fintech ecosystem. It doesn't mean they do fintech badly, it is just where the focus is. Then I'd like to also talk about India. It's certainly the most promising markets for fintech, even more so than China. I think people would be surprised to know. And we have 3 cities in the top 20. You spoke about Mumbai, but we have Bangalore, Mumbai, and Delhi. All of those are within the top 20 spots on the ranking, which I think extremely good news and bodes well for India. And they are ahead of cities like Tokyo and Beijing. So India has 7 cities in the top 100. Other cities that are in there include Pune, Hyderabad, and Chennai. And the same things apply. The demonetization of cash has been challenging for consumers that have an awareness and the need for financial innovation. Its technology industry is reputable, and the very critical difference for me here is that different from China, India is outward focused and is outwardly focused, and many other markets, whereas China is inwardly focused, and I think that makes a difference.
Right. Thank you, Dennis, for those great points. It's good to hear, like, see the various states, where do they stand. So for sure, UK, US, China, and India are definitely doing a lot when it comes to this fintech ecosystem. We are seeing a lot of things happening when it comes to Singapore, Vilnius. Are, of course, they have done significant, traction that they've got their ecosystem. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of these cities are being ranked on a key parameter. It's all about, which are the fintechs who are home, are there at that location, and how much of funding they're actually getting. So that actually brings our next panelist, which is in the investment space. So, Teresa, with that, it's the whole thing, fintech sector getting all this attention. Many people look at it more around, how many billions of dollars is actually coming into there. So of course there is a market, of course there is a problem to solve, there are so many things that's happening. So Teresa, tell us, how do you see this ecosystem from your lens?
Thanks, Suniti, and hi, everyone. I lead investments in financial inclusion at Omidyar Network India. We're an investment firm focused on social impact, and financial inclusion has been a major area of interest for us for many years now. Our portfolio has 13 fintech companies across lending, savings, insurtech, and neobanks. So I do hope to bring some perspectives from being an investor in fintech in India into this panel. On Suniti, on your question on why creating a conducive fintech ecosystem is important to us as an impact investor. I think the power of financial inclusion to drive development is clearly well understood today. It helps people to invest in livelihoods or education, or even mitigate financial risks such as healthcare emergencies or crop failure, which routinely pushes families into poverty. And in India, while a vast majority of the population even today is still underserved by the formal financial system, and we've come a long way in the fact that every household today has a bank account. But a significant majority still borrows from informal sources, saves in informal instruments like unregistered chit funds, does not buy insurance or protection or pensions for retirement. And we believe that technology has a huge role to play in improving the adoption of these financial products among the next 500 million consumers. And at Omidyar Network India, we have a dual checkbook approach, which means that we do both for-profit venture capital investments as well as grants to support research and policy advocacy to address some of the structural impediments to financial inclusion. So, as an impact investor, we try to take entrepreneur perspectives to policymakers and vice versa. From an ecosystem perspective, the way we see it, there are many things that need to come together from an infrastructure standpoint, but we think those will improve over time. And the data security and privacy aspects as well are very important, but I will not cover it because I think we'll talk about it later in this panel. I think from a customer standpoint, the lack of trust is perhaps the biggest barrier of fintechs. That traditional banks and insurers have earned the trust of customers over a long period of time, and having a strong physical presence has also worked to their advantage. So if I were to break it up in digital payments and lending, there is a lot of progress already in adoption. And what we need to build now is, strong mechanisms for online dispute resolution, grievance redressal, etc. Insurance in India has traditionally been a push product which is sold by agents. And here, product simplification and transparency are much needed if digital adoption has to accelerate. And in savings, I think KYC has been the biggest point of friction for many years. In India, we have 3 different regulators for banking, insurance, and mutual funds, and each have separate KYC requirements, which makes the cost of onboarding a customer still very high for fintechs focused on savings. So these are some of the core problems to solve for. If fintech adoption, had to grow sustainably, and investors keep investing in. I mean, it's been a very favored sector for many years, and for that to sustain, I think these are some of the core problems that both fintechs along with the ecosystem needs to solve for.
Thank you, Teresa. For sure, like you are doing a great bit of like supporting such a important sector, and for sure, I strongly believe that fintech sector is something which actually help us in getting inclusion done. Financial services has been there since years, but then it's only like last 10 years we are so much about like leveraging technology and solving the real problems, and that is where fintech sector is so close to everyone's heart, and everyone is playing a very strong role in this. But while like I heard all of you from ecosystem perspective, there is something we all know that there are this legacy and the large players who are also like trying to do a lot of things, and then there are like the smaller players, and that's the fintech ecosystem when you are talking about. So when it comes to these key levers, whether it is data, whether it is technology, whether it is like innovation, whether it is capital, this fintech players, they do have the advantage, they have the good technology, they do have the advantage that they have the right agility. When it comes to like data, acquiring customer, or when it comes to capital, that's something is something that they score not score depending on a lot of external factors. So as long as these levers are balanced, they are this ecosystem is really moving in the right direction. At this point in time, when we are seeing what the pandemic situation that we are in last 4 months, we actually have seen that this whole balance is not in place. That's where we are seeing that people are not getting the right funding, people, customer acquisition is a problem. So there is so much of challenge that is coming into this whole ecosystem, and this getting disbalanced. And I strongly believe that this ecosystem has a very strong role as a part in this time. So I'll go around. I'll come back to you, Chris, again, and just give us your thought on what are the challenges that you are seeing in this time. And I know we don't have a lot of time. I would have come back to opportunity later, but spend some time. Let us know what kind of challenges, and along with that, what kind of opportunities you actually see. Like what should people really look at it?
I'm afraid I have to challenge you on one point, which is the idea that the incumbents have got good technology and good data is completely bogus. As far as I know, there are no incumbents that have any capability in this space whatsoever. And that's me. I'm being very strong in my commentary, but I can tell you, I've worked with a lot of the big financial services firms in every sector. My specialist sector is asset management, but I've worked with all of the banks, and they are not good at integrating their technology. I don't think there's a single organization, financial services in the UK, that doesn't exist on half a dozen different platforms that they have failed to integrate over the years. So data systems in those organizations are short, and one of the opportunities of fintech is to act as an organization that can either knit that stuff together or provide a viable alternative. The problem is that the hump that you have to get over of development, the hump and the risk, both in terms of cost, risk, adopting new process, all of that is so huge for these big incumbent organizations that they struggle institutionally to change. If I've heard one large bank's board say this, I've heard a dozen times: we're making lots of money, why should we change? Why should we take the risk? This is the almost ubiquitous change. I froze, so okay, I'll rewind where I was. Can you hear me again now? Suniti, can you hear me? You can all hear me? Good,
Yes.
right. So I
Yes.
think I got to the point where
Yeah.
I was saying that all of these organizations, they have a big challenge. They can't innovate. They find it difficult to innovate. And so one of the big opportunities for fintechs is to help them. But to do that, they've got to get past huge layers of compliance. They've got to get past layers of internal political issues. Let's face it, if you are in charge of a department with 500 people and a fintech is going to come in and replace 500 people, the person in charge of that department is losing a lot of power. So there are a lot of big political issues. So that's the landscape. The difference here with COVID is it's made that landscape, in my opinion, even more unequal. Okay, so I'm going to go off screen, off video. It's made it more unequal. And in the UK, what I've seen is that a lot of that innovation has been stifled because the companies that you want to come through and act as the innovators for big companies need funding. And their access to funding has been limited. The big issue in the UK is that almost every government funding mechanism.
I think we lost Krish.
Okay, I'm back again, but I'll let someone else answer the
Okay.
question because I'm getting trapped.
Sorry. So, Gela, would you like to take it from there?
Sure. I think Chris is absolutely right in the sense that those companies that would have been able to help weather the immediate impact of the crisis have actually been underfunded or don't have access to proper funding. When we're looking at the UK, when we're looking at, there are a couple of examples in the US as well, the Paycheck Protection Act. And for us, it's CBILS, it's the funding for small businesses. A lot of the legacy technology and the governance structure of these traditional organizations means it's a slow process to onboard new customers, it's a slow process to do the underwriting, and it's also slow to actually distribute funds. And we see that fintech can clearly eliminate some of those challenges, from an immediate KYC validation on onboarding for a new client, automatic processing of the actual application itself, linking all of the accounting information from the accounting cloud platforms, and marrying that up with the transactional history that sits inside of the bank, and being able to actually give a proper assessment on the risk factor, and therefore, can we actually get more funding through this, or how am I positioned to get alternative funding if it's outside of these intervention relief packages? And we've just had a bit of a hullabaloo in the UK where the Treasury and Bank of England have actually cut off funding for this. The fintechs no longer have an opportunity to access to funding to distribute loans, but they themselves can't take advantage of the interday bank rate setting for low interest loans to small businesses. And it's a real shame because there is, in time of crisis, there is a direct correlation of speed of relief to actual viability of business and sustainability. And that has an impact on employee retention and the furlough schemes and putting money in the pockets of consumers that help continue to churn the economic engine. And we've seen that this slow distribution of financial intervention during the crisis has actually set the economies back across the board. And there's something about data distribution at speed and scale that fintech does that legacy and incumbent systems cannot. And I think the real shame is that there hasn't been an advantage taking of that distribution of data at speed and scale during the crisis. Some governments recognize it, they've encouraged it, they've allowed fintech to be part of the distribution chain, and we see that actually has an immediate impact on the retraction of the economy. It slows it down. For those governments that can't handle that funding distribution or the redistribution of funds across the board to prop up the economy, they're under even more threat, especially because we expect a second wave and a third wave of the coronavirus. And therein lies what the Achilles heel is for the incumbent infrastructure inside of the ecosystem. The crisis laid bare exactly where the systems are broken, and this lack of interoperability and this lack of ability to process using the latest in technology and the latest risk schemes and algorithms schemes, meaning algorithms, but they haven't taken advantage because they haven't necessarily adopted the partnership model that allows those incumbents to then redistribute or use a middleware system or a middleware player in order to, to create or distribute the end product. And I think what we've learned is either you start to build a new stack and you go completely digital. You don't digitize, you become digital. And a lot of incumbent institutions have digitalized their processes, but they aren't truly digital. And where we're seeing the most success is those incumbents who have decided to prop up their own new digital bank stack that allows them to leverage the partnership model with fintechs. And that's the best that we have. Unfortunately, that's the best. It's not the best model that's out there to exploit. So I think crisis, Achilles heel is definitely legacy systems and lack of interoperability, and digitization has been put over digital, and digital is actually where it really matters.
It's a cultural thing. That's what it is.
And absolutely cultural. And I think you mentioned this in the boardrooms, right, Chris? It's about the attitude of preserving the status quo because it does make money and we have an obligation to return profits to shareholders, versus actually understanding this notion of cannibalization. The first time we mentioned cannibalization, it's cannibalizing your current revenue streams in order to ensure that you have future revenue streams. And I haven't seen a single incumbent that has taken the risk of cannibalizing their own revenue streams in order to prop up their future. Look at Apple doing it. They did it every time. I mean, they put an iPhone out there with a computer in your pocket, and it cannibalized their laptop sales, and it cannibalized their iPad sales, but it maintains the new revenue streams. And Amazon did the same thing. It wasn't just about books. Let's go ahead and actually, set up our own digital library of sorts, and let's take it off of printing, and let's take it off of the distribution channels. We'll cannibalize our own distribution revenues in order to start introducing different lines of business. And Amazon is in financial services now. I mean, that's cannibalizing their business in a different sort of way, but it's future-proofing and moving the business model to match what technology actually enables us to do. And the problem with banking in general and financial ecosystems in general is, yes, cultural, but it's a lack of understanding, embracing the cannibalization model to ensure that the future is there. And let me tell you, you only capture market share if you're a first mover or a fast second mover. And legacy banks or legacy traditional structures that haven't put an eye to setting up a new digital bank stack are counting their days.
Okay, thanks, Gela. That's a good point. So for sure, I can understand, like, there is a critical point both you and Krish are making, that there is an opportunity that is out there, because a lot of these legacy financial institute will actually be in a rush to improve it, and they would like to really interact and partner with the fintech ecosystem, and that actually brings in an interesting opportunity for fintech players. For sure, like, there's a connected point that I strongly believe is the flow of fund has actually gone really bad during this time. So on that thought, so Dennis, before I come to you, let me go to Teresa and just get a quick pointer from her on how. So Teresa, how do you see the ecosystem at this point in time? Has your lens changed just because it is COVID? Anything specific that you would like to mention?
Sure. Yeah. Again, if I were to break it up, the fintech ecosystem and how COVID has, posed new challenges. For fintech lenders, there is a 6-month repayment moratorium in India, which has created significant uncertainty on credit losses. So this poses two challenges. One, fintech lending is mostly unsecured, which means that it gets the lowest priority on repayment from a borrower standpoint. And also an environment of heightened risk aversion for banks means liability side challenges for smaller fintech lenders. So because of that, clearly, fintech lending is not attracting a lot of investor attention at this point. But for payments, savings, as well as insurance, there are strong tailwinds for fintechs as digital has really become the primary mode of acquiring and servicing customers in the post-COVID world. And here we see, both fintechs as well as incumbents some incumbents do have strong digital capabilities, and they will gain significant market share in the short to medium term.
Okay, great point. So I'll quickly come to Dennis on this, this particular COVID point. So Dennis, anything specific that you would like to add to what everyone said? Anything specific, since you also list out multiple accelerator, incubator, influencers, market, potential opportunity, and all. Do you see anything changed? Anything that you would like to highlight?
Yes, I'd very much like to highlight the challenge for me across the board has to surely be the survival of small business. And small business, we all know, form the backbone of every economy, and the decisions made around the support for the sector. The big challenge I feel here is the funding landscape for fintech has to change post-COVID. It is easy to fall into the same trap of investing in the same old companies, which lead to a few lion's share of investment. And I'm sure I would love to talk to Teresa offline, because I think they are looking at things more differently. So I'm seeing positive signs, as she has mentioned, that investors are starting to look differently. They are not only looking at as in GDP, but they are starting to look at the effects of fintech, the effects that make for real change. On the company level, fintechs will in the future have to build and scale for profitability, because pockets of money, big pockets of cash are no longer there. So they need to think about their business models more clearly.
Great. So for sure, I think people are focusing on efficiency more and cutting cost. So with that, we just have like 3 minutes left. This is like a quick point that I might want to go around. So I'll come to you, Chris, on this point. Uh, from a cross-border standpoint, we have seen companies going from one country to other, doing their due diligence and doing expansion stuff like that. Now that because of COVID, a lot of these things will not be able to happen. So how can let's say if I have to pick up like India UK corridor, governments partnering, what is that can be done differently so that we continue to support the ecosystem, whether a UK company wants to come to India or an Indian company wants to go to UK? Specific that you would like to mention that will help the ecosystem during this time from opportunity standpoint?
All I can say is I'm at a point. I mean, I have a company that operates cross-border, and we don't sell to an Indian audience yet, but we sell to Europe and South Africa, and we're moving into the US. It's just the thing that we service, which is a financial inclusion issue, by the way. It's all about long-term savings and pensions, and also has part of what Gela talks about, which is data standards, and we operate a very strict data standard that we're setting sort of globally, if you like. So I have a kind of slightly different perspective in the fact that I don't see the same problems. And when I think about the way in which we have managed to solve those problems, it has been about good communication, good process, good teamwork. It sounds, I think you're asking me for some big infrastructural issue. You're asking me a question which is about how I can solve the problem generically. All I can say is from my own experience, we haven't had it, simply because we communicate very effectively between our two remote locations and operating with clients globally. If, as the FinTech envoy, you were going to ask me that, I'd say it's information is what you need. To enter a new market, you have to have a soft landing. Absolutely. And that may be what Denise is talking about, which is about having that sort of hub infrastructure, whatever it is, virtually, if not physically. But actually, you need to have that market awareness and market intelligence. And so the thing that I always recommend, if companies, say from India, are coming to the UK, either physically or virtually, find a partner. Rather than coming into the UK and trying to get your authorizations from the FCA, piggyback off a partner who has those authorizations and work with them. I think that is probably the most effective way to do it. And perhaps in the current environment is almost the only way that Indian companies could come to the UK and work, since it has to be virtual. They can't be physically here because the travel is restricted, and I suspect those restrictions are going to go on for some time to come, and vice versa. Find yourself a partner who can inform you about your marketplace, who can supply you with authorizations, who can supply you with funding. So really get to know those partners. And that means market intelligence. You've got to do your homework. Absolutely do your homework on the marketplace.
Right. Great. Interesting point. I'll actually end with that thought, Krish. We could have go on for longer, but I have to close the session. So definitely two key takeaways from the session for everyone here. At the initial discussion, we did understand that probably as Indian ecosystem, we have to learn how UK has invoice structure, how there are right representations in play. There's also a second point around how F data is supporting more from a data focused association kind of a stuff. So these are two things probably will give this recommendation to FCC, IMI who are organizing, so that they can actually take it forward. The second point more around opportunities. This is very clear that everyone really need to look for opportunity in the right manner. Yesterday we heard it in the Asian market. Today you guys mentioned about the UK market, Europe market. So everyone is looking for bringing in the right change, and this is what is the right opportunity that everyone has to grab. And in this process, the let's with open hand work with the right accelerators, incubators, ecosystem players, the trade bodies, and players like Fintech who are providing so much of data insights. And this is the time where we all need to work and collaboratively and not in our own goals. So the more we collaborate, the more we learn, the more information we'll find, and the better it will be for this ecosystem. So with that, I'll close it here. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I would like to connect with you all separately, and thanks for your time for this GFF.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That was an insightful session. Thank you for taking time out to be with us today. I would also like to thank our valued partners, CrediWatch, SBI Mutual Fund, Bank of India, OnGo, and ID Sign. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back after a quick 10-minute break. Stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you.